In the previous video, I demonstrated how to recode interval ratio variables into ordinal variables. So I have the variables SIBS and EDUC, number of siblings and number of years of education, and I have those recoded into 4 category ordinal variables. I'm going to use those variables to run a crosstab, and if you need a recap on how to do that, watch the previous video for that demonstration. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the Analyze menu, Descriptive Statistics, and then down to Crosstabs. And we're going to use my 2 new variables. We're going to use the number of siblings that a respondent has as the independent variable to predict the number of years of education that someone gets. So siblings will predict education. We always want to make sure that we put the variables in the correct spaces in SPSS. So we're going to start by doing our independent variable of SIBS, and make sure you get the right one. We want SIBS 4. And that is our independent variable, so it goes in the columns. And we're going to use education, and we're going to use education 4 as our dependent variable, and that's going to go in the rows. So place that variable in the rows box, and you have SIBS in the columns box, and we're going to have SPSS provide percentages in columns. So click on the cells button, go to the column box under percentages, click that, click continue, and paste your syntax. And we're going to run that crosstab to see if there's a relationship between the number of siblings you have and the level of education that you have. And this also has frequencies in it, count, but you can ask SPSS to leave that out if you just want the percentages. And remember, you can use shorthand syntax as well. So siblings ranges from 0 to 3. So 0 is only children. People who are in this category here with one have 1 or 2 siblings. In the category for 2, they have 3 or 4 siblings. And then this is a large family, 5 or more siblings. And then education ranges from people who have less than a high school degree, people who have a high school degree, people who have some college, and then people who have a bachelor's degree or higher. Okay. So you can kind of quickly glance at this and see that there is a relationship between the number of siblings that people have and their educational attainment. You can see there's a difference in the percentages if you look within a row across the columns. You can see the differences here. And we want to know the strength of the relationship. So we're going to look for the highest percentage and the lowest percentage in each row. So here we have 30.9 and 7.6. And then here we have 29.1 and 13.1. And then 40 and 23.7. 39.3 and 17. It looks like the biggest one is here between 30.9% and 7.6%. So there's a difference of 23.3, and that would indicate there's moderate strength for the relationship. We would say the direction here is negative. So as the number of siblings increases, so it goes from left to right, as the number of siblings increases, educational attainment decreases. So if you're looking for some patterns here, you want to find the largest percentage in a column. So here, people who have siblings in the highest category, they tend to have the lowest level of education. The next one is this one right here. People who have somewhat larger families, but not the largest, they tend to have mid-level education. And then you see people who have no siblings or just a couple of siblings, they have the highest categories of education as well. So it's not perfect, and it seems as though these three groups are more or less similar, and it's the people who have a lot of siblings that are really disadvantaged. So that's really what that's showing us here. You can kind of see how these patterns look a little bit easier if you take out the frequency, but I have both of them in there. Okay, if you want to summarize the relationship between SIBS 4 and Education 4 that you see here in the crosstab, you could calculate a measure of association. And in this case, it would be appropriate to calculate a gamma, a chi-square, a Kramer's V, and any of these would be appropriate because they are measures of association that we can use for ordinal variables, and they can show strength and direction, with the exception of the chi-square. The chi-square can't show us direction, and it cannot show us strength. So if you want to get these reports, you just need to go to Analyze, Descriptive, Crosstabs. We already have everything set up in here. And when you're here, click the Statistics button, and let's ask SPSS for a chi-square. We can ask it for a Kramer's V, and we can ask it for a gamma, and then click Continue, and then paste. Go back to your syntax editor, and you can see we're going to ask for those measures of association. Click the arrow, and then you get your crosstab just like you did before, and you also get a chi-square test, and then you get symmetric measures down here. You have your Kramer's V and your gamma. So by itself, the chi-square statistic does not really tell us anything useful, because the chi-square statistic is 293.902, but the associated p-value under the asymptomatic significance two-sided column, this tells us something important. We can look at this and see that it's statistically significant because it's less than 0.05. It's less than 0.001, in fact. It's very small. And given that it's statistically significant, we would say that these two variables are not independent from one another. So we would have evidence to reject the null hypothesis that these two variables are independent from one another. If you go down to the Kramer's V down here, you see that this is a little more useful than the chi-square, and it's calculated using the chi-square, but it can only range from 0 to 1, and this is a 0.181. You can also see here the statistical significance is in this last column, approximate significance, and it's 0.000, so it's less than 0.001 and less than 0.005. So there is statistical significance telling us that the relationship between the number of siblings that you have and your educational attainment is significant. And then if you go to the gamma is perhaps one of the more useful ones because it shows us strength and it shows us direction. It's negative, so there's a negative relationship, which is what we had deduced earlier just from looking at the crosstab. And this confirms it. It's negative 0.342, so it's moderately strong, and it is statistically significant. You can see that here. We're looking for numbers less than 0.05, so it's statistically significant for the gamma as well. So we have a negative relationship that's moderately strong. These are things that we can use because we have an ordinal level of measurement. If we had used the original variables, EDUC and SIBS, not EDUC 4 and SIBS 4, but the original variables, then we couldn't actually use the chi-square test or the gamma or the Kramer's V. Instead, we would have to use a different measure of association, one that can account for interval ratio variables. And so we would use correlation, or Pearson's R.